Okay, we left off in our last lecture talking about the difference between an agent on the one hand who owes fiduciary duties and brokers on the other hand. And I wanted to go over one more example before we move further into the fiduciary duties. And the example is one from a real life case that actually ended up becoming more personally familiar to me through this class a couple of years ago. I don't know if anyone has ever heard of jumping horses. That is competitions for horses that jump not a steeplechase where they run around a track very fast over hurdles, but rather a dressage, which is a Olympic event where the horses are doing sort of more of a ballet indoors to music, and they're going over different kinds of hurdles. So in context of that type of jumping horses, there was a gentleman who had become newly rich, wanted to join the horse society, fancy society, very exclusive, to own and breed horses, not thoroughbred horses, but these jumping horses. And his name was Oliver Bibo. He had help, or he sought help to get into the jumping horse business by retaining the services of one of the 5 top trainers of jumping horses in the country. His name was Barney Ward. And the deal was that Bibo would give Ward $100,000, which would be deposited in an account, a bank account that Ward would have access to. Ward was to use that money to find the best 3 prospective jumping horses that could be trained into champions. Purchase those horses with $100,000. And then Ward was to train the horses, house and feed the horses until it was determined that they could jump or not jump. And if they were suitable for jumping, and then they would be worth a lot of money, Ward would sell those horses at some point, and from the proceeds of that sale, Ward would receive 15%, and that would pay him for all of the work that he did to find the horses and house, feed, care for them, and train them. And of course, the other 85% would go to Bibo. So Bibo opens the account, puts in the money, and notices that Ward hasn't drawn it down. Over time, Ward is out looking for the horses. Bibo realizes, and so he waits. But then finally says to Ward, "Hey, what's happening? You haven't bought the horses." Ward says, calm down. You don't want me to buy any horses, do you? You want me to buy the best. That means I have to search and search. It may take some time." So Bibo says, "Fine, I'll be patient." Bibo, however, sees days and weeks go by and can't control himself, and so calls Ward again. "What's happening? Tell me what's going on." And Ward tells Bibo, "Come on, you're being overly nervous. You're a novice. You're showing that you're really new to this game. If you were in this game with the rest of the horse crowd, you'll know to be patient and wait and not so over eager. So, you have to get with the program." So Bibo holds back and bites his tongue and waits and finally says to Ward, "Come on, you tell me what's going on." Ward says, I'm looking. You don't want me to buy the first horse. This takes time. You got to get used to this. Finally, one day, Bibo gets a call from Ward. Ward announces, "I've found the horses, the 3 horses." Bibo is excited. He pops the champagne. He feels like he's in the horse business. He's got the horses. He wants to know their names and where are they and visit them and everything about them. Ward trains the horses and after a while reports to Bibo, "Sorry, these horses are duds. They do not jump." Bibo is crushed. He's angry, he's disappointed, he's bitter. Ward says, "Come on, you can't act like that. That's not the way the horse people act. If you want to be in this crowd, you have to take it like a man. You have to be cool. You have to be calm. You have to be able to afford the loss of this money, or else you don't belong in this game at all. People who are in this game know that it's a long, long shot. You know it's a long shot, and so don't cry over it. Just suck it up. So Bibo sucks it up, tries to be like a real horse person, and not like a naive person. And so he writes it off, basically, until someone whispers into Bibo's ear, "Hey, Bibo, did you realize that when Ward told you that he was scouring the earth looking for those horses over all that time, did you know that Ward actually had those horses in his possession throughout that entire period? He had them in a paddock in Maryland. They had been given to him months before you even met Ward by their owner, whose name was Shakamoli, a German, and Shakamoli had put them in the possession of Ward to try to get rid of them, what's called consignment. Shakamoli sought Ward to get rid of those horses before you met Ward." So Bibo says to himself, whoa, that's not what I understood. Now, if those are the events, is there something wrong that has happened to Bibo? Did Ward do something wrong? Is this the case that Bibo should just suck it up and walk away and say, okay, well, too bad, I'm not going to cry over spilled milk? Or is this the case where you would bring in the proverbial little old lady to come in, maybe, to set things right because something's been bent out of shape? I'm going to show you, ask you to look at, the contract that was signed between these two people. We haven't looked at contracts yet, of course, and we are going to look at contracts. And when we talk about contracts, but let's look at one now and see, with this backdrop, whether you can suggest something that Bibo might be able to do to point to that would give him a remedy for this peculiar situation that he feels like he's been put in. Can you all see this agreement? If you can, you can come up and look at it more closely. If you'll notice that this agreement starts with the word agreement, that is indicative of a contract. In a contract itself, a formally written contract by a lawyer, you don't see the word contract. You see the word agreement. And that's because there are 4 elements to a contract. For it to be a valid contract, it has to have what boils down to 4 initial letters that stand for 4 terms, which are the 4 factors that you need to show. That's called a mnemonic or a memory device, when you boil things down to a few catchwords with initials that you can remember easily. So the catchword or the mnemonic is ACCL. A valid contract, enforceable contract, is one in which you can show ACCL. The A is, guess what? It stands for agreement, exactly right. 6 arrowheads in the morning for half the meat at night. That's the agreement. And in fact, once you have that, you have a contract. So contract and agreement are really synonymous. Do you know what the C is? The first C? Consideration. Consideration. Excellent. What do you mean by consideration?
Somebody's getting something, somebody's receiving something. It's two-way street.
Perfect. A two-way street. Each person is giving up something, and each person is getting something. 6 arrowheads in the morning, arrowhead is giving up something. Half the meat in the evening, the arrowhead is getting something. From the hunter's point of view, getting 6 arrowheads in the morning, giving up half the meat at night. So each is giving, each is getting. So you're looking at the terms of the agreement to see if there's consideration. The contract is the agreement, but to make it valid, you need this consideration, a two-way street. And this is what differentiates contracts from any other types of agreements that are not enforceable. What's an agreement that is not enforceable? I think, the illustration of the arrowhead maker saying to his children, if you clean your caves, you're going to get hot dogs and hamburgers tonight. So the kids clean their caves. And the arrowhead maker gives them pot roast. It looks like there's an agreement, but really there isn't consideration. Well, I guess you might say that there is consideration in that degree, but it's too informal. How about this? How about who wants an A for this course? I agree to give you an A if you just raise your hand right now. A few hands raised, okay. So we have an agreement. So I agreed to give you an A. Can you enforce that? You'd like to, of course. You'd like to say yes. But what am I getting? Nothing. So it's a promise to give a gift is a nice agreement, but it's not enforceable. Of course, even if it could be that I would get something from you, like maybe I'd give you an A and you would slip me $20 or something, that would be consideration, but that would fall apart due to the final ACCL, the L, which is legality. That promise to sell an A for $20 would be illegal. So it would be an agreement that had consideration, but it would be unenforceable. The second C, the ACC, second C is capacity, which has to do with your mental awareness, your mental functioning, or your age being over 18, in which case you have capacity, either under or over 18, but under 18 you can get out of a contract. A person who's drunk, inebriated, high can make a contract but can get out of it. A person who's totally brain dead has no capacity. And so the contract may or may not be enforceable based on the pleasure of the person who has limited capacity. So we have to look at capacity in determining if a contract is fully enforceable. So ACCL, agreement, consideration, capacity, and legality. So looking back at the contract, looking at the first word, agreement, the contract is written this way, formally, to tell the reader, hey, look, dummy, check this out. Agreement, see? This is a contract. Doesn't have a heading, doesn't say the word contract, but the signal, sort of the secret handshake, is in the word agreement. So agreement made between the two people, Bibo and Ward. Then we have a few paragraphs that begin with W's, what are called the whereas clauses. Whereas Ward is engaged in the purchase, whereas Ward wishes to represent, whereas Bibo wishes. These are aspirational things or background context cues that is kind of the opening music before the curtain rises on the stage and the opera begins. They call that the overture in an opera, the music that the orchestra plays before the action starts on the stage. In a book, it's called a preface. In a bedroom, it might be called foreplay. But in the contract, you have these whereases to bring you up to the point where the action starts as background. And the action starts with the word now. It's like action, now. The word now, therefore, is the beginning of the action on the stage where you see the promises being made and communicated back and forth. 6 arrowheads in the morning, have to meet at night. That was the action words. Those are the action promises. Those are called covenants. Promises and covenants are synonymous. But look how the action begins. Now, therefore, and what's the next word? In consideration. What's consideration doing there? Is that just a coincidence to see the word consideration? It's our second element. It's just like agreement. It's telling the reader, hey, you got both of them. Agreement and consideration here. So this is going to be an enforceable contract. And now the folding of the agreements themselves. First is Bibo shall set up the bank account, like I mentioned, $100,000. Then paragraph 2, as the authorized agent for Bibo, Ward uses best efforts to find and purchase horses suitable for trading and jumping horses. 3, Ward selects the horses that are suitable and will purchase acquired title to them. 4, he's going to start training them, caring for them, maintaining them, boarding them, and all the expenses shall be borne. And there's a $600 expense. 5, advancing more. Ward is going to be advancing money pertaining to the care of the horses out of his own pocket. Then on the sale of the horses, here's where the proceeds click in, 15% to pay back Ward. 7, the horse prices on sale are going to be acceptable to Bibo, and Ward shall disclose all details of those transactions. And this agreement may be terminated by Bibo, and may be terminated by the board only after the sale of the horses is purchased for Bibo. That's it. With that as the contract, is there anything that Bibo can say that Ward didn't do? That breaching the contract? You'd say that everything has been done according to the contract, Kevin?
Yeah, for the most part, I don't see where he breached it.
Anybody want to differ? Yeah.
When you violated on number 2,
Yeah.
Okay. So if there's anything that you might think wasn't done properly, 2, meaning use best efforts to find and purchase the horse suitable for training. Kyle?
I would say with the consent of Bibo, that he already had the horses, and he disclosed that he had horses prior to it. He says not to go with him to do it.
I mean, it's 7.
3.
3 is upon Ward selecting, together with the consent of Bibo, suitable horses, Bibo shall acquire said horses. So Ward told Bibo, I found these horses, so let's go buy them. So he didn't say anything about disclosing all the details in that. That clause doesn't say anything about all the details. There's something about all the details down at 7, but that's about the detail of the transaction to sell the horses. So 2 seems to be the best possibility, or the closest possibility to something that he did wrong. Let me tell you that best efforts is a weasel word, weasel term. It doesn't have any clear, quantifiable meaning. If Ward says that I use my best efforts, who's going to contradict him? Someone will say, well, you had the horses the whole time. How is that your best efforts? He'll say, well, I was still looking around every horse I could find or think of. I still thought that these were the best. Now, who's going to say otherwise? Bibo would have to retain someone who's the 4th most famous horse trainer
in the world to go over and pick over whether he can find anything that wasn't best efforts. And then, of course, that expert isn't going to know what Ward knows about the horses. Ward will testify convincingly, I'm telling you those were the best horses in my view. So that is a very long shot, crapshoot, to try to contradict him after the fact, because it's so wishy-washy. Plus, probably these horse trainers know each other, so who's going to testify if you could find one, and how expensive would that be? The other thing about best efforts is that typically in publishing, for instance, it's almost as meaningless. Every publisher tells authors, "Oh, we're going to give you $50,000 for the book, and then we're going to use our best efforts to sell it." So the author is going to think, okay, they're going to use best efforts, so I'll just take this low amount relatively, and then they'll probably put me on Today's Show, and they'll give me a whole website and speaking engagements. The book comes out. They don't do hardly anything. They put like a little message on some blog someplace, and the author says, well, you didn't use your best efforts. And the publisher says, for this type of deal, for this type of thing, this is our best efforts. Go tell them that they're wrong. So there's no clear standard. So it is a very difficult lawsuit to sue on best efforts in this situation, probably any situation. Plus, listen to this, to bring any lawsuit to trial, a contract case, you have to pay your lawyer. Lawyers charge in Manhattan from $300 to $1,000 an hour. To bring a contract claim to court, you're going to need a team of lawyers working months. And then to get to trial itself, preparing for weeks and weeks. That's tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of legal fees to bring a contract claim to trial. It's possible to settle, but you never know that. Okay? So what if you win at the trial? What if Bibo wins? What does he win? Does he get his attorney's fee paid by Ward, the loser? Will he get reimbursed? Before talking about breach of contract, what are his damages? What does Bibo Ward have to pay him for the breach? Do you get your attorney's fees paid? In what's called the American system, the American rule, the rule is everyone pays their own legal fees, whether they win or lose, and there isn't any shifting of legal fees from the loser to the winner to reimburse the winner. In Britain, yes. In Great Britain, the English rule is the loser pays the winner's fees. Which is a disincentive to sue. Because if you're suing somebody and you lose, not only do you pay your own lawyer, you have to pay the other side's lawyer. It's scary. So your American rule is everyone eats their own fees, So if Bibo wins, he's got to pay his own legal fees, could be $100,000 or more, which he'll never get from the other side. So now he's out $100,000 because he put it into that bank account. Oh yeah, what happened to the horses? I didn't mention. The horses were sold at the end. They were sold, one was sold to a petting zoo for like $1,000. One was sold to some other type of maybe carriage horse in Central Park for $500. And some other horse was very unfortunate, had the glue factory, but grind his bones in the glue factory for $250. That's what the resale of the horses were. So Bibo is out the $100,000. He's out $100,000 or more of attorney's fees. He's now out in a whole $200,000 more. How much could he possibly win from a contract lawsuit? If he were to win this lawsuit, Bibo, what would he win?
Maybe the price of the horses.
What the price of the horses, the $100,000 back? Well, that will only get him half of what he got. Listen to this. This is the rule for damages. When we get to contracts, we'll go over it in more detail. But the rule is that the non-breaching party has to be put in the position he would have been in had the contract been performed. Bibo is the non-breaching party. Ward is the breaching party. Ward has to put Bibo into the position Ward would have been in had the contract been performed. Okay, so if the contract had been performed and Ward had used his best efforts, what position would Bibo have been in financially, monetarily? Do we know?
Well, you would have done the whole, you would have done like 80% or 75%, because the other guy got a 15. So
85% of what? Had Ward performed the contract using his best efforts, do we know whether those horses would have ever jumped?
no,
They could have ended up the same as these horses. $3,000 is the resale price. It's totally speculative whether best efforts would have resulted in any positive outcome. Sure, they might have been superstar multi-million-dollar horses. That's like looking at a high school basketball player and a kid in a high school basketball team and saying, well, that kid is, if we train him, he'll be in the NBA. That's completely speculative. Same as horses. This is athletics. So you cannot put a number on what that outcome would have been. It's too speculative to even be susceptible to being a contract remedy. In contract damages, he couldn't win anything because he can't prove anything. He can't get the $100,000 back because we don't know that would have been the position he would have been in had the contract been performed. So he gets zero, even if he wins. So this guy is in a complete contract hole. Hopeless. Unless what? What could get him out of that hole? What is the essence of what Ward did that strikes you as being poor form? Wrong, based on what we've been discussing. Yeah. Andrew.
So like a lack of consideration. Because he already had the horses, so he didn't.
That's contract stuff. What about where we left off last week? What about the Northeastern case, Potty? What was the problem there?
was it the agency? Whether or not he followed his fiduciary duties to do what he said he was supposed to do.
Did Ward act in his complete, one-eyed, single-minded concern for Bibo here? With complete and utter loyalty, truthfulness, transparency? Or was he leading the guy on?
That he had just found out about the horses when he had them before he even.
Yeah, that he just found out about him, which is a lie, actually. He didn't say to him, I have these 3 horses that were given to me months ago by Shakyamuni. I'm going to give them to you. He said, I'm looking around, I suddenly found them. He was deceiving him. Well, wasn't that the claim in the Arpadi Northeastern situation? You sent me to this person, you didn't tell me what you knew, told that the steward was the shark. Here, Ward is sending Bibo into a contract, deceiving Bibo as to what Ward really knows is that these are not the great things that you might think they are. I'm led you to think that, but I'm not telling you the full truth. That's what Northeastern didn't do. They didn't tell him the full truth. In the Northeastern case, whether Northeastern was going to be hit with penalties or actually get paid was a question of whether Northeastern was a what or what?
Broker or agent.
Broker or agent. That made the difference. Does that make a difference here? If Ward was an agent and he violated his fiduciary duty, what are we talking about in terms of damages? We are talking about throwing the book at Ward. Fiduciary breach is going to be as serious and severe a penalty as any in the law. Just as we hold fiduciaries up to the highest duty, we also hold them up to the highest penalty. The highest penalty in the law that we're going to be
discussing in torts, and to the extent that it seeps over into contracts, is fraud, and where there's punitive damages. Punitive damages will be a remedy in torts. Punitive means we are not punishing to make the person whole, to give them back what they lost, or to get even. You're hitting people with punitive damages when you're punishing them so that they never do it again, deterring this behavior in the strongest way other than putting a person in prison. Punitive damages are sky's the limit. Whatever the jury or the judge feels is appropriate to maybe put this person out of business, teach them a lesson. So it's a joker's wild card. If Ward is an agent breaching his fiduciary duty, then we don't have to worry about attorney's fees. There won't be attorney's fees that Bible has to pay. A lawyer would take a good fraud fiduciary breach claim to get 1/3